Okay, we are going to call this workshop of the Martin County School Board to order. If you would all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's mine.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Mr. DiTerlizzi?
Here.
Ms. Pritchett?
Here.
Ms. Russell?
Here.
And Ms. Roberts?
Here.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, public comment. Citizen input is vital to the improvement of our district. Most times, your remarks may be listened to without comment from the board members or superintendent. This does not mean they are heard with any less intensity or concern. Where appropriate, the superintendent and staff will investigate your comments and report back to you and the board with an answer. We thank you for taking the time and having the concern to make our district better. Your presentation to the board should not exceed 3 minutes. First up is Wes Rexroad.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. So I read in the news and the local paper about the attempt, or now I guess it's authorized, to introduce Prager University content into the school curriculum, which is troubling to me because I remember meetings from 3 to 4 months ago when we were talking about banning books because we didn't want our children to be indoctrinated by some radical agenda. And yet we are contemplating, and apparently it's legal in Florida now, to allow YouTube videos into a classroom that are attempting to indoctrinate children with a Christian nationalist far-right curriculum. And so I'm just sort of wondering why, when America turned into a Christian nationalist state, and when one form of indoctrination became intolerable and another form of indoctrination became tolerable, somehow I was able to get a bachelor's and a master's in engineering without PragerU videos, and qualify to run nuclear power plants without PragerU videos. So I'm pretty sure that Martin County children, and the children of the state of Florida, will be able to get by without Prager University videos. I encourage you to use all tools available at your disposal to educate our children and to give them a broad variety of opinion. I'm not opposed to exposing children to different opinions, different outlooks, especially in the topics of history or civic or even science, because science is about making hypotheses, doing experiments, drawing conclusions, and seeing if the facts support the hypothesis. So I'm definitely encouraging Martin County students to have a wide variety of viewpoints. But it's difficult for me to understand why we have all these educated teachers, we have PhDs, we have a superintendent with a PhD, we have all these educators that know how to teach the subject, why we would want to rely on a far-right YouTube channel to teach Martin County children. Thank you.
Thank you. Sydney Thomas?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have two things that I wanted to talk about, one being the PragerU kids. I'm waiting to hear back. I have email correspondence with the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum, so I would highly rely on his advice or recommendations on what's happening with PragerU kids within Martin County School District. But I've also seen some email correspondence coming from the board that says something different. It is an exceptionally hot topic with members of the community right now, and I just highly recommend that there is a unified message that may go out to community members so that community members who are concerned aren't, blowing up everybody's email boxes, talking to teachers, and really, really concerned if it's not something that's on the table. So there's a lot of confusion, and I ask that the board clarifies that with the general public, because it's pretty much my entire inbox right now. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was, I see that there's mental health on the agenda, as well as just healthcare in general. I have concerns. I'm really worried, actually. I know that members of the board are also members of Moms for Liberty. They have said very clearly that healthcare does not belong in public education, and I want to ask, did anybody, because the people who say that actually are not educators with a higher education, no experience, did they ever sit to ask why? Why do we have healthcare? And mental health, by Moms for Liberty's own admission, is healthcare. Why is it in schools? There's a lot of reasons, but two of them make it a non-negotiable. One being that it's one of the only places where all of the minors of our society attend, except for the ones who are homeschooled or private schools or something like that. Most of them attend, it's like 95% of students attend public schools. So it's like the best way to screen for things, to run checks. Like otherwise it's going to be, children will get lost. And two, being that if a brain is, in terms of mental health, if a child is struggling with anything at all, whether it's a health concern, mental health, issues at home, anything, the brain is literally not ready to learn. And the school district's job is to intervene with at-risk students. And if that means intervening with healthcare, intervening with mental health care, then that's why it falls into the scope of what their responsibility is. If that is to be removed from the public education system, the actual education will get worse. And I think this concept that kids should come to school and they shouldn't talk about anything social and they shouldn't talk about anything that's other than math, reading, science, and history, and then that's it, we're too distracted, is super privileged and exceptionally myopic. And I'm really concerned about the direction. So I hope that you all advocate for healthcare and mental health care. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Alicia Harriel.
Good afternoon to the members of the board, superintendent, everyone in their respective places. For me, I'm here as an advocate, also as a community organizer with Faith in Florida, and I also serve now as our second vice president of the local NAACP here in Stuart, Florida. I'm just concerned with the transparency, just for like the previous speaker spoke on, just letting the community know where we stand when your boss, the governor, states that, slavery benefited black people, but we need to recognize like America was built by black people, and also that if in order to become this A district that we aspire to be, we need our black people, our black students to get the help that they need to increase their testing scores, increase their scores academically as well, because we can't get to a school if our black kids are still failing. When it comes to the graduation rate, I want the school district really to look at that and probably put an emphasis on our minority students, because without them getting to that A level, we will no longer be an A district. And I really advocate that we can have like a minority recruiter, a director of resiliency, student services or student support, because our minorities, our black and our brown students, we need more people that look like us in this school district, in the school system, and in our schools. And I think we need to put an emphasis on that as well. And then we won't have this culture war that's going on, the racial insensitivity of our students and also our teachers and administrators. As it comes to the employees that work at this district, they felt like they are underserved as well. We have people that's been working here 10, 15 years that has not gotten a raise that they deserve. They're still working just at a bare minimum, and we need to support those students and their parents and also the faculty and the other employees of this school district. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment. And we are going to move on to our, the rest of our agenda, the school board policies. So we'll take up item 4.01, which is which is the terms for school board members. Does anybody have any questions about that policy or comments about that? That follows the new legislation that puts in place 8-year term limits, eight-year term limits, so 2 consecutive terms for school board members. And there's some caveats in there when, depending on when you're elected. So if there's no questions, none? All right, moving on. Ah, shoot. Sorry, I just like closed out my. Do you have it? Can you go? Because I just closed I don't have my printed copy.
Okay, so 4.02 is 3 policies. Remember, those are the ones that are related, 1120, 3120, and 4120. This is the Neola template that talks about employment of administrators, of instructional staff, and then also of support staff. This is a pure template that's just talking about security checks, et cetera. There is one piece that I bring to your attention on 3120. 3120 on page 3 of 4 has alternative certification, a block there, and I understand that the superintendent wants that optional block removed. So everybody okay with that? So that's those 3. The next 3 policies at 4.03 are 1121-01, 3121-01, and 4121-01, which is background screening and employment history checks. So that just adds provider care, changes some dates of when you have to get the screening by. Any questions, or is everybody good with the Neola piece on that? The next one, there's 3 policies that, again, are the ones that mirror each other. There's 1217, 3217, and 4217. This talks about weapons. And I had discussed this with the superintendent on the second paragraph. I think that it's my personal feeling, and I'd like to discuss with the board. In the second paragraph where it says, furthermore, the board prohibits district employees, in the case of 1217, from having an unloaded firearm securely encased within the interior of a private motor vehicle when that vehicle is parked on property leased, owned, or contracted for by the board. I personally think it should say having a loaded or unloaded firearm, and should say securely encased or not encased, so that there isn't any question that it's only unloaded firearms that you can have, or it's only if they're securely encased. Is everybody okay with those?
Ms. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms.
Go ahead.
Roberts?
Go ahead, Mr. Dieterlizzi.
Why don't we just say the board prohibits district employees from having a firearm in their private motor vehicle, in the interior of a motor vehicle?
I believe that the Neola language that's talking about unloaded and encased is because there is some regulation that has to do with concealed permits that allows you to have, that has some definitional things about whether they're unloaded and whether they're encased or not encased. So I think that's why Neola wrote that, but I just, when I talked to the superintendent today, just to add clarity to that, instead of saying unloaded, securely encased, if we covered all instances, loaded or unloaded, so encased or not encased, that then we would be covering all the bases.
I'm fine with that.
Okay? That takes care of those 3. Then there's 2 more policies that are also weapon policies. One is 5772, which deals with students, and the next one is 7217, which deals with visitors. Everybody okay with the Neola pieces on that? It also talks about look-alike weapons, et cetera.
Yeah.
4.05 is program of instruction, that's 2215. That has several pages, and let me find the one. On page 2, under D, instruction about sexual orientation and gender identity, where it says in the last line, the instruction must be age-appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students. Later in the document, the next page, when it talks about letter O, talks about comprehensive, age-appropriate, and developmentally appropriate K-12 instruction. I think that the word "or" should become "and," so that you don't run into a situation where you have, this may be age-appropriate for a 12-year-old, but if the 12-year-old has learning disabilities or something, it may not be developmentally appropriate. So I would not want to think, I would think it needs to be both. It needs to be age-appropriate and developmentally appropriate, like they've used in other parts of the document. Everybody okay with that piece? Then the next one, 4.06, is 2271, articulation and access to Florida College System institutions. The main adding piece in that is in the second paragraph that spells out that the district will pay for the cost of instructional materials for dual enrollment programs. Everybody okay with that? The next one, 4.07, is 2370. It's educational options. That's a new policy. So it's the blue-colored one that you're seeing in your book or in your papers. In that one, there's a few changes that the superintendent is looking for. In the third paragraph that starts with, the superintendent shall prepare a plan of educational options for use in meeting special needs. We would stop there and not include the rest of that paragraph. And then at the bottom of the page, right after it says prior permission of a parent or guardian shall also be required before a student under age 18 participates in one of the available educational options, we would be removing the one that outlines the piece of instructional plans, because obviously that's obvious, all the way through on the bottom of that page. And then on the next page, we would not be checking any of those 5 boxes. We would keep the sentence that says, participation must be subject to the oversight of a credentialed teacher who will review the instructional plan, provide or supervise instruction, and evaluate student performance. And we would keep the sentence that says, the superintendent shall develop the administrative procedures necessary to implement this policy. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
4.08 is about school health services. That's policy 2410. This is a Neola template that has been updated to take into account the law and to also add the availability of menstrual hygiene products at the end of it. So we would be selecting that option. Everybody okay with that? The next one, 4.09, is 2410.01. That's mental health services. That's a new policy. Talking about the school board will implement a school-based mental health assistance program that includes training classroom teachers and other school staff in detecting and responding to mental health issues and connecting children, youth, and families who may experience behavioral issues with appropriate services. Talks about contracting with mental health service providers. Talks about examinations for students. Talks about a mental health plan assistance, a mental health coordinator. And I think, let's see, everybody okay with that?
Can I
Yeah.
just say something?
Sure.
Superintendent Main, can you explain to the public that we've already been doing all of these things?
Yes, all of that is pointed out in our mental health plan that was just recently adopted by the board. We do this every year. This is just new policy to become in alignment with the legislative updates from the governor's office, but all of the mental health programs that we have been ongoing, and all of these pieces have been included.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to answer one other question, I know that, I think one of the speakers said something about the screenings, and I know that, just from my work with Children's Services Council, that there are required screenings at different grade levels, whether it's vision, scoliosis, those things that are done in conjunction with the health department, that those are required, that we help take care of that. And in addition to doing that, the Martin County School District also works with Children's Services Council, where they do dental evaluations for students that have permission from their parents to have their teeth looked at and to have sealants put on and that type of thing, of course with the parents' permission, but that's also happening too.
And screenings start happening as early as birth to,
Yes.
it, even in the birth through 5 realm, those screenings are taking place, mandatory screenings are taking place annually.
Yeah.
Thank you.
4.10, interscholastic athletics is policy number 2431. That's also a Neola template. There's some additions on the second page.
This is mainly adding the ability for charter school and virtual school students to participate in sports as required by law now. So you see those areas marked in green. Everybody okay with those? 411 is adult education, policy number 2450. That's a rework from Neola. We would be selecting the one that says the board shall also maintain an Americanization program of instruction for the benefit of foreign board residents of the district, and also be selecting the one about the Veterans Benefits and Transition Act. That second option at the bottom of the page. Everybody okay with those? 4.12 is policy number 2460. 2460 is exceptional student education. These are implementing statutory changes from the Senate Bill 290 and the House Bill 795. And I believe there's a new section added on page 4 about early literacy skills for retained pre-K students. Everybody okay with that? 4.13 is student assessments. That's just a technical correction that occurs on, I believe, page 4. Let me find it. Oh, page 3, letter B. It had an incorrect reading of what the statute was. The statute is actually 1008.25. So that's correcting. It's just a technical piece, which really, I think that's, I kind of look at that more as a Scribner's piece, which we have permission to do that, but it doesn't hurt to just do it this way. 4.14 is the Teacher's Bill of Rights. This is a brand-new policy that's coming out of Neola. This is taking the Florida statutes, 1015-01 to 1015-06, that are kind of outlining what the teacher's rights are as far as continuing education, the right to control their classroom, the right to direct their classroom instruction, all of those pieces. And I believed I asked the superintendent, and I don't know if he mentioned to you, Ms. Falls, that it ended, it's the blue page one, and normally at the bottom of a page of a policy, it has the Neola copyright. And I didn't see the copyright at the bottom of the second page, so I just wanted to be sure that we have the whole policy. Okay, so if you can check, because we end under D2 with one sentence for D2, and I just want to be sure that if it needs to have more.
Cut off.
If it needs to have more, I think with the chair's consent, we would go ahead, remember this is the workshop, and then it gets advertised for the first advertising read. So if we just went ahead and pushed it through to the first read and advertising approval and just highlight that for us if there's any additional language, as long as we didn't disagree with that, whatever the last sentence is, if there is a last sentence, it would be able to move to the first read and the second read. 415 is controlled open enrollment, policy number 5121. That adds in the piece from House Bill 633 about dependent children of active duty military. So you'll see that added in on page 2. I think one more place. Just on page 2, I think. Everybody okay with that? 4.16 is policy 5420, reporting student progress. That's just a technical correction. It's on the first page about the annual report. Instead of it being Florida statute, it needs to be Florida statute 1008.25. So it's just correcting the statute number on that one. Everybody good with that? 5420. Next one, 417, is restrooms and changing facilities. That's policy number 7421. 7421 takes care of House Bill 1521 about safety in private spaces. It's the blue policy. There's some definitional language on page 2. We would be selecting the box that indicates that every school in the district has separate restrooms for females and males, and also selecting the box that said the district offers unisex restrooms at its schools. And then in the next paragraph, also selecting the box that said the district offers unisex changing facilities at its schools. Everybody okay with that? 418 is student records. So student records have has some language that's taking into the requirements of 543. You'll see that on page 9. There's an option on page 9 that the superintendent is recommending that at the bottom about transferring records, we would be using option 1 that says student records shall be transferred in accordance with the requirements of FAC Rule 6A 1.0955. And then on page 11, deleting the rest of option 2. And then on page 11, which is the time things, number 3 would have parents and eligible students would be notified via email and/or a telephone call anytime they're required to use an online educational service that corrects that personal information. And then under 4, it would say if student information is collected by the online education service, parents and eligible students will be provided notification regarding information that will be collected, how it will be used, when and how it will be destroyed, and in terms of disclosure, if any, by mail and/or email. So it's specifying the manner that it's disclosed to them. And then number 5, we would be selecting the board will not utilize any online educational service that will share or sell a student's information for commercial purposes. I also want to bring to the board's attention on page 8. So at the very bottom of page 8, this is the, remember we have just taken care of the forms that are being done, the parental consent forms that include the options as far as directory information. Remember, we've had that whole big discussion about directory information. So right now, that bottom paragraph is indicating what we define, what our school board is defining as directory student information, which is a student's name, photograph, address, telephone number, if it's a listed number, email address, date, eliminating and place of birth, participation in officially recognized activities and sports, height and weight, if a member of an athletic team, dates of attendance, grade level, enrollment status, date of graduation or program completion, awards received, and the most recent educational agency or institution attended. So we have the ability as a board to indicate what we define as directory information. I've talked to the superintendent and to the public information officer that if we eliminate the word photograph from there, and then handle photographs and yearbooks as a separate consent, once this policy goes through, if we handled it that way, that then it's not, because right now what will happen is, you realize that with the forms that we've done and using directory information the way it's defined here, that puts us in a box so that if you wanted your child's picture in a yearbook, there isn't a way internally to say, I want directory information withheld, but I want my photograph in a yearbook. So the yearbook and media release are combined in options 1 and 2. Option 1 being the one that allows you to release the information to a third party. Option 2 not allowing that release to a third party and only using it for district type things. But and option 3 is kind of like you're in witness protection, don't release my name to anybody. So if you picked option 3, if you had a program, for example, a drama program or a yearbook or anything, you would not be listed in any of those things. So if you don't want your child's picture taken, you have to go to option 3. You can't be in option 1 or 2 because of the way that we've defined directory information. So I guess I'm asking the board.
That could apply to several of these, though. That could apply to the sports activities.
Sure. So my thought was the things that have to do with sports, your height and weight, your participation with sports, those type of things. I think we can handle those the same way that when I sign my child up for a volleyball team. At the time I'm signing my child up for a volleyball team, I can indicate at that time, I don't want you to use my weight, or I don't want to be included in a roster, but it doesn't have to be part of directory information. So in my head, directory information should be a minimal amount of information. It would be the information that would say, my name is Lee Roberts, I am a 3rd grader at Pinewood Elementary School. And my contact information is, whether it's an email address, phone number, et cetera. That would be the directory information. So that if you were releasing, if the YMCA is a third-party vendor, is looking for 3rd graders that might want to be in, or 8th graders that might want to be in youth and government. So I want a list of all the 8th graders to see whether they want to be interested in joining up with YIG, Youth in Government. I'm a third-party vendor. I request that information, directory information, remember it's considered directory information, and it's, to the extent that it's allowed by FERPA and state law, we would then disclose anybody who had picked option 1 and 2, or actually just option 1, because it's a third-party vendor. Here's all the 8th graders who've said you can contact them, and here's the information that you need, right? But that information, right now, because the way we're defining directory information, not only includes their name, their contact information, their grade level, et cetera, it's an extensive list. It's probably more extensive than it needs to be. This really hasn't been,
But how does that limit our ability to release other information, like, for example, to a university who's recruiting students on the wrestling team, to not be able to share that information with that third party? So how, I just want to make sure that it's not tying our hands. I get it for third-party vendors that are selling something, or that, but when we're,
so,
I just don't
So
want
there's-
this to be an issue
Right.
that parents are, a hurdle that they're going to have to overcome when they're,
so there's two pieces on that. One piece is, and Mr. Shazo might want to weigh in, that there's one piece that has to do with post-secondary, which has to do with colleges, which is saying that if you are allowing, one of our consents, our parental consents, is whether you want to allow your name and your information to be released to post-secondary institutions. So a parent has the right to say, I don't want my information released, or I do want my information released. So that's one piece. I think the second piece, so let's say I'm, and that would be a third party. That isn't somebody that's a district. So
Right.
if you indicated in number 2, I don't want to be contacted by a third party, I only want to be contacted by the district for district things, that third party will not have the ability to contact you. Except, in our case, we have said that if you want to be contacted by a post-secondary, you either give permission or don't give permission. So that's pulled separately, correct, Mr. Shazo?
That's correct. I was just going to go pull it up from the last meeting so that you all could see kind of how it looks again.
I'm just thinking that when you get to, when you're looking at, so I think the sports pieces, I look at the sports pieces as all pieces that are separate, right? But if it's directory information, so what directory information do you want assigned to your child that would be available on an ongoing basis?
well, I think it's, so I guess I never opted out as a parent for my 3 children who graduated from the Martin County School District. I never opted out of my kids receiving any exclusions on the directory information. But I also don't feel like, as a parent or as a student, that my child was receiving this crazy amount of mail from third-party vendors. So I don't know.
So right now, if your kids were in school, you would have the option to say, I don't want to get the third-party information, or I do want to get the third-party information. It doesn't mean when the caps and gowns are available that you won't be contacted directly for caps and gowns, but you will get the information from the district that
Correct.
says, caps and gown, the guy is going to be there Tuesday. Order your caps and gowns now, but you won't be contacted by the third-party group. But the question that I'm bringing up here is, how limited do you want directory information to be? That's the, and I think at a minimum, if we remove the photograph piece from the directory information, is this correct, Mr. Shazo?
Yes, and I've pulled it up behind you so that you all can see how it looks, but this is option 2 as it stands, which would be consenting to releasing information internally for yearbook, for any type of school or district initiatives or publications, websites. If local news was coming to do a story about a school, that you would grant the district the you know, the option to allow your child to be interviewed, that's all covered under option 2. And the discussion that you all were having a moment ago about post-secondary institutions and military is included in the high school only box, where it only applies to, and that's in accordance with FERPA, where it designates that we have to make it available unless the parent opts out. So we put that in there for high school families only to declare their intent in that section.
So when you go back to the option 2, if you removed the photograph piece from the directory information, just start with the photograph piece. If the photograph was removed from directory information, it wouldn't be in this option 1, 2, or 3 box. It would be a completely separate box where you could pick, I want a photo media release, I just want yearbook, I don't want the photo media, but I do want the yearbook. You could pick it from there because it's not in the directory information.
So what, I'm curious, what kind of burden, like, are we gonna be creating an issue where we're not gonna be able to, with fidelity, track this information? That's concerning to me, that we're gonna present to parents that we are going to be able to, I don't know.
And that was-
That's a concern. So
And that was
if we
the-
say it, we better do it.
Correct.
And that was the main piece when we first looked at it. If you look at other districts, larger districts, that allow you to take that whole list of directory information and say, you can release my name, you can release my photograph, not my email, not my address, yes to my place of birth, no to this. And it was like but our staff said, and the attorney said, that's like a nightmare, because the monitoring and the ability to control that and do that with some fidelity is going to put a huge burden on a district of okay, Marcia, you're a yes for photograph, but a no for email, and Jennifer, okay, you're an email but not a phone number, and you're a phone number but not a home address. You know, it was like it was too many, so that the thing that came back from staff was, it's an all or none. The way you control it is by defining your directory information. And you define your directory information to however you want your directory information to be, but you can't sit there and say, here's my list of 14 things in directory information, I've got 3 that I've approved of, you've got 9. I mean, nobody has any of the same thing. I mean, it's just too many list pieces. So. I don't know, Jennifer, superintendent, anybody?
What you've stated is correct. That is the advice that we got from legal. And looking at it from a manageability perspective, given that sometimes individual schools are the entities that are approached by third parties, like maybe their class ring vendor is Perf Jones or Jostens, they're running those reports and providing, if it's 10th graders, 11th graders, we wanted to make sure that with fidelity, like you shared, that we would not be giving out a field for a student that parent had indicated was not allowed to be given out. We got really strong legal advice that was the recommendation, that it was all or nothing. And as Ms. Roberts shared, our attorneys did look at several other districts to kind of see how they managed it, and it seemed to be in accordance with that. There are some things that maybe people want to consider, like the yearbook pictures being separate, because you do have to really consent to both as it's written. But I don't know that it would be feasible, at least at the school level and probably the district as well, with all of these different fields, to be able to track each student's preferences individually, to run reports for things that are needed for people that have consented to third parties and internal use.
So, I mean, I'm okay taking the photograph out and making that separate. That they would be consenting to that. But I guess, and they're consenting, so the yearbook would be for our internal. So if they opted out of directory, they would still, if they sign the photo release, we can still use that internally for.
So my thinking would be that an option that some parents would want to pursue is, yes, I'm consenting to yearbook. You can put my child in the yearbook, but I'm not consenting to you doing anything else with my child's photograph or putting them on social media or anything like that. Like separating those two pieces out where they're not missing out on yearbook, but they're not giving permission for the school to feature them on a website, or a reporter to interview their child, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about all the ways that we publicly display photos, like in the gymnasiums, they do, depending on the sport that's going on, they have the big banners with all the kids' photos on
Correct.
them, and the seniors are highlighted, and
I will say
one's not gonna
tradition,
be able to hang because the parent thought directory information, it's just really how,
And if that parent selects option 3 for directory information, I don't want my student's information disclosed, yes, that's what it'll look like. And in a drama brochure or a band thing, it will say not disclosed, Hamlet, not disclosed.
and again, I just fear that when we're forming these sports teams and things, and the coach is the one who's doing all that work, and volunteer parents, I can attest to that. We're putting together the program and getting the photos and hiring a photographer and making sure that they know what day they're getting their picture. We don't know, those volunteers are not gonna know.
Well, they will know now if they have picked option 3, and think of it as like they're in witness protection and you're not gonna release
Yeah,
anything.
but how's that gonna be communicated in those circumstances? Because, I mean, they rely heavily on volunteers to do that kind of work. Especially for, I know, in athletics. I mean, you have 40 kids on a lacrosse team, you're not, as a volunteer, you're probably, if you're coordinating that, you're not asking every child and tracking their mom down to say, hey, did you opt in or opt out? And how did you do it? Which one did you check?
Well, that's why I'm thinking that for the sports things, the recognized sports activities, the height, the weight, all that stuff, if that is removed from the directory information, so I guess I'm looking at it as the more limited you make the directory information. If I don't want a whole lot of information about my student out there, but if you made the directory information name, school, grade, and contact place, right? I may then say, okay, I'm okay with that. Because you're not taking height and weight if they sign up for a sport. You're not taking the date of their birth. You haven't included things that I want to have control over. I want control over my child's age. I don't want it to be directory information that somehow or other somebody gets a hold of. My child is a 5th grader who's 8 years old, or a 5th grader who's 14 years old, or, whatever else. I don't want that. I just want, but if it's just merely these are the kids that are at Pinewood, this is the grade level they're at, this is their name, and here's their contact information.
Can't you, within option 2, just put a box under each of those and check off? You want the photo, you don't want the yearbook. You want the yearbook, you don't want the photo media release. I mean, they'll read it and determine whether they want it or not. But if you give them a box within option 2 for each of those, it seems like that would solve the issue. Am I being too simplistic?
I think, to your point, it could solve the issue for the people that definitely want to only consent to yearbook photos. But the other thing, I think there might be some caveats in the photo media release that piece by piece, people would be, interested in possibly not consenting to.
Well, that's their prerogative, isn't it?
Yes. And also yours to decide how you all want to define those pieces.
So when I go on the website or I look at the Martin County page, I see kids all the time. It appears that their parents are giving permission. I think
They are. So they've given a release, because I've been in schools before where somebody, let's say it's Kirsten or
Correct.
something, it's like, no, don't take pictures of these kids over here.
Correct.
Remove
Okay.
these 3 and put these over here. Now you can take a picture of the
So
class.
how is that going to change?
So when you take it out of the directory information, you take the photo piece out of directory information, right? So right now, I'm a person who I don't want my photo out there unless I have permission. But when I say I don't want my photo out of permission, because of the way that we don't want all these different boxes, I have to pick number 3. Because my definition of directory information includes photo. So I can't pick and choose. On one hand, I can't say, I want you to release, I'm going to give you permission to release my directory information, which includes my photo. But then I'm going to say, I don't want you to release my photo. So what happens is, if you say if you say you want me to release your photo, that's saying directory information, because photo is embedded in the directory information. I don't have the ability to say, I don't want my photo released, or you can't do one and not do the other, I guess is what I'm. So if you take the photo piece out of directory information and handle it completely separately with a photo media release and with a yearbook release, then it's not embedded in there. So when I've given you permission to release, or don't give you permission to release my directory information, the problem is, if I don't give you permission to release my directory information, but then say, oh, yeah, but you can release my photo, now I'm picking and choosing which pieces of my directory information I can release.
I guess I want to know, is this an issue in the past?
For clarification, to my knowledge, since I've been with the Martin County School District, what we've had in the past is the sections that say photo media release and yearbook photo. Those were kind of the consents that parents had to pick from year after year. They define most of the things, but there wasn't, I guess what legal's opinion was, there wasn't a clear enough thing of being able to really understand comprehensively that it could be a third party. It was that language that you're seeing, photo media release and yearbook pictures, was the information that was the consent at the back of the student code of conduct. But that covered internal use, and directory information, as in policy and FERPA, means that it could be considered third party, even though in the majority of situations there's other laws that preclude the release to a third party. We had to make it clear that there are some minor instances where if you didn't opt out, it could be third party if another law didn't preclude the release of it. So we had to make it, legal's advice was to make it a lot more clear what you were consenting or opting out of.
So clear.
So clear. Well, I thought I got it, actually, last week, but.
But those two items, for years, that's what was printed. You did photo media release and you did yearbook, and
So for years, we were not doing the directory information consent from parents clearly to parents.
Right. We
The
were
way
not
that we're
giving them the
required to
ability
do.
to opt out.
We were not giving them the ability to opt out, to say, I don't want my child's date of birth released. We were
Correct.
not giving them the option to do that.
correct.
And now we are.
And now, because legal has said, no, you need to be doing that. There needs to be an annual notification. You need to be giving them the right to say the directory information that you've defined, which includes date of birth, which includes height and weight if you're on the volleyball team, that you're given permission to do that. Or you're opting out saying, I don't want to do that.
Can I see the opt-in for, or opt-in out for to use that information internally? Don't we have one that while a parent may opt out of the third party,
That's option 2.
This is option 2, is internal use.
but
Internal
if
use.
okay.
Option 1 is you'll let a third party have access.
Option 1 is anybody.
Anybody, the
Yeah.
whole wide world. Option 2 is no third party, but you're allowing your information.
Yeah, and we need to really make sure that parents see that you're opting in for this very specifically for the school district to use.
And the language is in there. I know it's probably hard kind of to see on the screen. It is in there, and it also, we've added language clarifying that even if you said that you picked option 1, that you whatever you need to do, send my information. In the vast majority of situations, it's still going to be protected information, even if FERPA says we can release it because other laws say that we can't. And we made it very clear that under no circumstances do we sell directory information. It's just simply that the federal law and state laws require us to define it. So most of the definitions that we have are directly aligned with what it says in FERPA, which is the federal law. But again,
But that's not the directory information that a lot of districts are using. A lot of
Correct.
districts have restricted the amount of information
they've
that they've
chosen,
defined
Correct.
as directory information for that reason. Because I
Correct.
don't want the date of birth of my child released and out in the public, so that when they
Correct.
get older and they use it as a password, to get on their banking thing, I can then hack into their bank. But this was the example piece that you came up with, correct, Mr.
Correct,
Shazza?
yes.
The primary purpose is to allow us to include things in certain school publications, a playbill, yearbook, honor roll, graduation programs, activity sheets, websites, videos, and social media platforms. So if you pick option 3, your name will not be in any of those things.
Right.
We won't take your picture, you won't be in the yearbook, and you won't be in any of that list of things that has disappeared off the screen.
It's option 3, it's up there.
Yeah, I mean, the list.
Oh,
of
I'm
things
sorry.
that would-
Yes, the list is
those
right here.
things. So the way that other districts are handling it is by limiting what they're defining as directory information. So that if you were tempted by option 3, because I don't want my date of birth out there, so I'm gonna pick option 3 because I don't want people to know my child's date of birth. I'm gonna pick option 3 because I want control over when you use my child's picture. So if you took out photograph from directory information, then I've got to give you permission on a different place for photo media release, and I can say, you don't have permission to use my child's picture. But my child can still be listed in a program, my child can still be listed in a graduation thing, because I've narrowed the definition of directory information. So in my head, it would be a student's name, address. I'm indifferent as to telephone number if it's a listed number, email address, grade level, enrollment status, date of graduation or program completion, awards received, and most recent institution attended. That's what I would think would suffice as directory information, meaning that you would be leaving out the date of birth, the participation in officially recognized activities or sports, the height and weight, if a member's of an athletic team, the dates of attendance, you'd be taking all of that out, and the sports piece can be handled in a sports release. So you can say whether you want, what you want, however, and the form that comes from the sports thing might say, if you're gonna participate, you're agreeing to the following things, but that's a different.
How's that, if we have a separate form for every sport, how will that be uploaded into the system? How's that going to, is it,
Well,
so we're gonna rely on everybody completing that form completely and then it getting uploaded into the system, or is it going to be a form in?
I mean, we could very easily do a similar form in Focus and also have the hard copy version, just like we're doing with this form this year. But again, it goes back to the consideration of fidelity, because this process is being managed at the district level. So we will be able to easily see every single student that we don't have a return form or something on file for. Where when the more coaches we have, the more different programs at the schools, volunteer coaches maybe that are tasked with it, it can be done, yes. But it would be a little bit more difficult for us to track everything with fidelity like we would be able to with this type of form that we're managing at the district.
Well, and then ensuring that all those forms are approved by the district and uploaded. Okay. So I'm fine with those limiting the directory information. I'm just really concerned about how we're gonna track this when we start adding a form at all these different schools that need to be entered into it's gonna be a lot.
But I think that's the only way you can really ensure that a parent, if I don't want my date of birth listed, if I don't want my height and weight listed, if my child signs up to be on the golf team and directory information is defined as weight and height, that
But
I
I
may
mean-
say, I don't want to do this, you know? So at least when I'm doing it on the golf team, I'm having an option where I can look at that and see, well, this is what it means. But it isn't, I don't get pushed to option 3 because I don't want my date of birth and I don't want my weight listed. I mean, I don't want my weight listed now.
Date of birth is, you can look up anybody's date of
You
birth
can look up,
anywhere.
you can look up date of birth, but you get varying information. And the thing is, some of it is correct and some of it is incorrect. Is that? But I don't think that we should be verifying students' date of birth. I don't think that that's our place. If you want to Google Michael Maine's date of birth, you can Google it, and I may get more than one answer for what his date of birth is. But if I ask the Martin County School District, Mr. Maine, who's a 5th grader at whatever, what your date of birth is, and if it's directory information and I can have it released to me,
But FERPA wouldn't allow us to release that information.
In the vast majority of situations, no matter what somebody comes to us and says, this is what I want, like, I want to send out a mailer, and there is 99.9% of the time, another legal exemption that our legal team will have us cite back to the person as to why they cannot receive this student information. I've seen it happen time and time again because I process the majority of the public records requests that come in for the district. It just doesn't happen. I mean, they may like push back and say, oh, but FERPA says this and your policy says this. And there's always another, whether it's a state exemption or something that legal says. I've never seen a situation where a third party that doesn't have like a vested interest, like I am the contracted class ring provider for this grade level, has been able to get information. It's always been like, this is the exemption and, you know, it's done deal, so.
and yet at the same time, even though FERPA has included that as directory information, they've included that, and yet legal is saying that's where you need to shrink your universe of information that you're giving. Which would make me think that there are instances where I could request directory information that include a date of birth.
There probably are. I have not personally seen them. I've seen third parties try to come in before and request things, whatever their private business is that they think they want to solicit to students or families. I've never dealt with anybody actually receiving what they've asked for other than someone that a school has a contract with that's doing legitimate business with the school to provide yearbooks, class rings, caps and gowns, whatever it is that they're doing for that school. It just hasn't happened. But to your point, yes, but legal's made it very clear that in the majority of situations,
So, and it's not just that disclosure, it's also for use by the district.
correct.
So so let's say I'm a 4th grade teacher and I want to say, I have this many kids this age, this many this age, this many. And by having it defined as directory information, I now have the ability to do that.
You would. I mean, we have other policies and things that prohibit employees from representing their students on their own social media or anything like that. I mean, there's standards in place that they have to follow district procedures when representing their classes publicly. But, you know, that would be handled on a case-by-case basis. I haven't experienced where teachers ever stepped out of the line and tried to disclose that. They know that they can't even, you know, show students on their personal social media. But, you know, those are considerations.
That's kind of where I worry about these sports teams and volunteers that are helping, because it's a lot after most of our coaches are teachers and they rely on volunteers. And what's going to happen if a parent opted out of this directory information or whatever and said on the form that here's my child's height and weight, and it gets published, who's responsible for that? That's because we're not going to be able to control that at the school level, the way that we're trying to protect this information here at the district level, but we kind of lose the control.
And I think that's what has made it a little bit easier to manage in the past, even if the board does choose to narrow what's considered directory information by this school district, is we had that one statement that it was, these are the fields. If you want them, yes. We haven't had, you know, issues traditionally with that. I think it was pretty straightforward. It clearly defined what all of the options were that you were consenting to if you were giving photo media release, and people have always just checked yes or no, and yearbook, yes or no. again, I do see
In that
the,
case, you were giving permission for photo media release, and you were giving permission for yearbook. You were not giving permission or withholding information for directory.
we,
So in your prior year, in
Mm-hmm.
your year before, it had nothing to do with directory. Directory did not appear in the code of conduct, and it didn't say anything about directory information. So I could be a parent sitting at home, eating bonbons and being happy that my information wasn't being done because I had checked that I don't want my photo taken. But yet, based on policy, directory information that was collected could be disclosed and used.
yes, to your point, we did not, to my knowledge, clearly define anywhere that this is what directory information means and this is how we define it. We did include in years past a list of most of the fields that we consider directory information under photo media release, but not all of them, to your point. So now they're all in there, but it's, I want to say probably like 2 to 3 fields maybe weren't included, and we didn't have that comprehensive definition that we're legally required to give on an annual basis of what it is.
So your photo media release doesn't have phone number, email address,
Correct.
and those types of things, correct?
Correct. There were fields that were missing from the policy and the FERPA definition in this that, would need to be added if we wanted to do something different. Because again, this primarily covers the scope of what this has been used for in the past is internal use. What are the types of things that we may want to share publicly about a student or a group of students? They're in a play. This is our honor roll students. These are students in this class that's growing a garden and the news wants to come interview them. That's what this was intended to cover traditionally.
Well, I don't know how we're gonna keep track of this. I mean, if the school district staff is comfortable managing this information and feel like you can do it with fidelity, I'm okay limiting our directory information and going with, including the option 2. I think that it's going to become something that our coaches are gonna have to check, and if someone did opt out of something, they're gonna have to check that, and I don't know, can a parent reverse it when they realize, oh my goodness, that kind of scared me, I opted out of that, or I opted my child out, but now I realize the impact of it. Is there gonna be a way to say, well, now I do want my daughter to have her banner in the gym during basketball season, or because some of that won't be allowed if they, because I don't know that people, we're struggling with it. I don't know that they're gonna read this and think, of course I don't want that. It's scary to have all of this information listed. So I want to make sure that we're giving them the option to go back.
And families have, even when we weren't defining it comprehensively in the past, families have always had the option to come back later and say, I want to change this. We've had situations where a special event was happening and we had a couple kids that maybe a teacher had identified as, oh, this would be a really good student to feature, but they didn't have consent on file. And the school had contacted the parent and said, hey, this is what we really want to do. This is what it's about. And then the parent would change their consent that day. They can always, contact us and change it. We've always been able to do that option, and it'll be an option in focus, or they can, reach out to the school. But, and I don't know if Superintendent Main wants to discuss anything about how we're tracking internally.
This is just a lot to manage.
Yeah.
And especially the younger kids, like the little ones that, the burden is gonna fall on the teacher to know what they're opting in and out of. It's just a lot.
So it is a workshop. And what I think we need to do, because we need to get this right, is that staff, I'm asking or requesting that maybe staff goes back to the table, takes a really close look at this, talks to our registrars and boots on the ground on how this will impact them and what feasibly we can reasonably monitor and take care of, because I do think of staff and I do think of which I know you are as well, but on the other end, a mistake can really be detrimental. And it's only going to take one for us to be on the receiving end of something that was just really difficult for us to monitor. So if we can, I'd like to just pull it,
So if we can
Give
just send
staff-
8330 on to the next workshop.
yes, and give us time, and then we will come back with our recommendations where we have thought through some of the concerns of the board and can tell you what we can reasonably accomplish or monitor in a safe way.
Okay,
Sounds good, thank you.
thank you. Can I finish a couple more before we
Of
start
course,
it?
yeah.
Okay. So 4.19 is policy 8600, which is transportation route planning. There's a few changes on page 4. It talks about the school bus infraction detection system. And ours would say on select school buses, so those are the newer ones that we're putting into service there. And then everything that's on the next page. The first sentence, and then the green stuff that's on page 5, that talks about violations and notice to the public, quarterly reporting to DOE, that piece. Everybody okay with that one?
Yep.
Okay. And then we have 420,
Yes.
which is 8610, transportation route planning. This is taking into account the statute 1006.21 and 1006.22, and House Bill 1, and so that has, it's a short policy. The numbers that would be filled in on the line at the bottom would be 200 feet. There's a minimum of distance between 200 feet between stops unless in unusual circumstances, and stops won't be designated where visibility is obscured for a distance of 200 feet in either way. Everybody okay with that? Then on 421, we have policy 8660, alternative transportation modes. That's a Neola policy that's also taking into the things that were modified by House Bill 1. You'll see in green that it talks about using school buses for regular transportation whenever possible, on the first page. So that takes care of that. Then the next one is 44.22, which is charter schools, 9800. And I believe,
Yes, this is, Madam Chair, this is also an item that I would like to pull for further review by staff. I want to make sure that we are in full compliance with some of the items that are listed here. There were a couple of notations that I had made in reference to just making sure that this is currently particularly item 3 on page 12. And there was one more, item 7 on page 13. So nothing of huge concern. I just want to, I don't think it's necessary to be able to pull, we don't have to take care of this right now, but I do want to take a closer look at both of those items.
Okay. Sounds good.
so then all of these with those changes will go through for a first hearing and advertising approval, and then the second one, accept policy 8330, which is student records, and 9800 charter schools, which will come back for a workshop.
Thank you.
Done.
Thanks
Thank you.
for doing that.
Sure.
Okay, and next up is, so the Florida School Code, I think I mentioned at our last meeting. So the whole entire school code is up for review, and they're kind of calling it deregulation. So as there is a portal and there's a method for school board members to comment. FSBA is holding some of these meetings. There was one on Friday, just
At 11, I'll go to that.
yeah, and just talking about statewide. I think there were only 2 superintendents that had already submitted some responses. They have like 1,800 responses from the general public. There is a public-facing link, which I'll get to, Jen, that the public can comment, and the regulations. When FSBA was reviewing it, just keep in mind, this is not a policy discussion. This is more of what can we eliminate from the code that is burdensome, that is outdated, that is cumbersome, that is duplicative, things that you want to just it's not really supposed to be about policy. Some of the policies you may want to remove, but, completely, or,
Change it.
sections. But changing them, this is not that discussion. That's probably something we need to have with our legislators. So I think there's different levels of review. So school board needs to review it. We have FSBA, that group is reviewing it and going to submit on behalf of the whole organization, which is a little more difficult because you can't get everyone to agree to what they're gonna submit. The superintendent and staff will probably be doing a review as well and submitting on behalf of the superintendent. So I want to know from the board, do we want to workshop it? Do we want to come back together? Or do we want to all just individually submit what we think are things that need to be removed? How do you all want to do that? Because, I mean, you see the education code, it's like a book that thick in little tiny print.
What's the deadline for submissions?
I want to say it's
August.
August 18th
18th, I
or
think.
something like that. It's pretty quick because this has to be done into the legislature by November 1st.
I think it's gonna be easier if we do it individually.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I just think.
Yeah.
And there is a portal, a public facing portal, but for us, there's a kind of a spreadsheet you can put okay, so we'll get that information out to everyone, and then we'll get the public facing portal on our social media and our website so that the public can comment as well.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
perfect, thank you. Oh, and, an update on the schoolhouse at New Monrovia Park. So the superintendent and I have been talking with Tyson Waters, and he's working with the county. So I just asked Tyson if the county needed a letter of support from us to negotiate, but they're right now in the middle of negotiating. And so when they get a final agreement, we will give our support to the final agreement between the county and the entity that are running the museum in the schoolhouse. So, but the county is right now negotiating with them. So, because we own the property, but we lease it to the county. So they're gonna do the agreement, and that agreement will come to us for approval, but since we're the owner of the property. So Tyson's working on that. If we need to have a letter of support, I mean, if there's consensus that I can work with the superintendent to do that, in the meantime, between meetings, if we need to get something, is that okay? Like, is everybody?
Yeah,
Okay.
can we can you send something to Julie Priest, just so she knows?
Yeah.
I know she's waiting to see if because she's asked a couple times if we're gonna send a letter, if we could send a letter. So if we could just let her know that what we're waiting for and at what point we're gonna be involved, at least she's not
Yeah,
just.
I can
waiting.
follow up with that. There were a couple of different people involved in the beginning, and then it shifted to one particular person, and Tyson and Chair Powers and I, so I can respond to Ms. Priest and let her know.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can, I know that, there are a couple of other people that I have been talking to about it as well. So we can send out something to all of them
Yeah,
and
just so
let
they
them
know.
know that what we're doing. So that, yeah, in essence, the county is taking the lead on it. All right, so, anything else on this agenda? All right, we are going to adjourn our workshop, and we're gonna take a quick little break, and then we'll start our special meeting. Okay, we are going to call this special meeting of the Martin County School Board to order. Since we just did the pledge, we will move right into the approval of our agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Ms. Pritchett, a second by Ms. Russell. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we're going to take things a little bit out of order. We're going to move, we're going to do the public hearing second, start at 3.01 after we do the action items. So we're going to move to 6.01. This is school choice. Mr. Main, if you'd like to explain that.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, what we wanted to do is be able to bring back forward, originally you had approved 100 students to attend Jensen Beach High School. We have 51 students currently on the waiting list that we would like to recommend approval to accept those 51 students off the waiting list.
So that would mean 151 choice
That is
students
correct.
at Jensen Beach High School.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to, go ahead.
Motion to approve that.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Russell, a second by Ms. Pritchett. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, the IDEA funding letter. Ms. Pritchett.
Do you want me to read what I have here, or do you want me to just explain it high level?
I think you can explain it and then,
So currently, we get about 13% funding for the individuals with disabilities. And this initiative would put it at about 40%, which would be considered to be full funding. So I'm asking the board's permission. There's a letter attached here. It's a template to send to Senator Harrell, and John Schneider and Toby Overdorf, asking them to support this at the state level. And if you click on it, you can see the template. We would just fill in the representative's name and ask them to co-sponsor HR 4519 to provide full funding of IDEA.
so are we asking our state representatives, or are we asking our federal part, like Senator Scott and
That's being
Rubio?
taken care of separately. We're asking our state representatives to support this as well.
Okay, so we probably need to take out their co-sponsor, because they can obviously, I don't know that they can co-sponsor a federal bill, but
Okay.
they could absolutely lend their support.
All right, this was the template provided by, do you want to talk about it, Lisa? She'll be able to, this is the template that was provided to us. So we were just supplying it to all of you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Superintendent Main, and members of the board. Yes, Mrs. Pritchett is correct. That is the letter or the template that they provided. And I believe in the email that was sent initially, they had actually the names, and they were saying that there were two officials that were co-sponsoring the bill. So it was just a template that was exactly left that way. So we just left the language the way that it was. Mrs. Sanchez and I both worked on it to just make sure that the correct numbers of students, ESC students were in there, as opposed to, with the population that we have, and just to show that, yes, this is something that we would hope that would be supported by our district, and having send it on off to where it needs to go, so that we'd be able to receive more funding for students with disabilities, which puts more funding back into the operating fund.
So maybe Diane could tweak it and take out the co-sponsor part and just send it to those three reps, Harrell, Overdorf, and Schneider?
But have we already sent it to Senator?
It already went to, I believe it was Senator Rubio and no, it was actually, oh my gosh, I
think it's in
apologize.
the original email that was
Yes.
sent, and then they just they listed all of the names of who you could send it to depending on your area.
Who did the email come from? I
This-
just,
I'd have to go back and look at
Okay.
my email, or
So,
Ms.
um,
Pritchett might have it on hers.
Are you asking us to individually send this to, or is it as a board, we're all gonna, it might be better for we,
It came from FSBA originally, asking us as,
yeah, I remember that, and I was just trying to find it.
I'm looking as well.
I thought that because it was IDEA, that they were requesting us either individually or as a board to be contacting our federal representatives, so say Rubio and Scott.
Correct.
and
That's what I
ask-
feel.
And asking
Yes.
them, please support this, because that's where it's gonna be voted on,
Correct.
is up in DC. So,
Yeah.
we
I-
can send something to our three, but I don't think they're invited to the party.
Okay, I
I
misunderstood.
think
I
that's why
thought
the
it,
language might say co-sponsor, because it has the two of them that you're speaking of in the initial email. You have it?
Asking them to
Not-
co-sponsor, yes, asking Senator Rubio and Senator
Two codes.
Scott,
Scott,
to support the bipartisan bill.
right,
Okay.
to support, yeah.
It has Representatives Lois Frankel and Jared Moskowitz.
Those are Palm Beach and Broward County. So our senators are Rubio and Scott.
Okay,
So we need to probably tweak this a little bit.
okay.
Yeah,
And
that's like
I'm okay with Ms. Pritchett writing on behalf of the school board,
Yeah, I don't have a
you
problem
know,
doing that.
but instead of it's the I'm writing, et cetera, if you word it so that our board has discussed it, our board is in full support of
Yes.
this, and I'm giving you the information, then it doesn't appear that you're an individual doing it. Then
Right.
it appears that the whole board
Right.
is, you
Yeah,
know
and
what I mean?
I'm happy to,
Yeah.
I can do that. I'll just use the template and send it where it
Yeah, and
needs
just
to go.
work with Jen
Diane?
or
Public
and Lisa to fine tune this, and
Okay.
then and write it on behalf of the board, and that we voted on it at this meeting or something like that. And so we'll just, what we can do right now is vote on that to and give Amy the authority to do that on behalf of the board. So
So move. Lee, Roberts?
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Roberts, a second by Ms. Russell. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See, okay, I'm sorry.
That's
I'm reading it here, and it says, "We have created a template for you to customize. FSBA will be reaching out to Senators Rubio and Scott in the near future, but we need your help with Florida House members."
So Florida House members, meaning the House of Representatives in Washington DC?
Yes.
Yes,
Brian Mass.
because that would be
Brian.
Brian Mast.
Yeah.
And I would still send
I would still send to Rubio and Scott at the same
Rubio,
time.
Scott, Brian Mast.
Okay,
um,
sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Will do. Thank you.
Of course. All right, moving on, we have item 6.03, which is
Can-
person,
Can we be sure, besides Brian Mast, also send it to Rubio and Scott? I mean, I
Right.
think anybody who's.
But
Yeah.
even like Byron Donalds, he's Florida House, isn't he?
well, he's not our Florida House member.
It's, okay, so it's specific just here to
To
Martin
your
County's
region,
reps?
yes.
Okay,
So when it comes from a Martin County,
okay,
he's our representative, so,
okay.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Will do.
Okay, item 6.03, personnel recommendations. Do I have a motion
Move
to
approval,
approve?
Roberts?
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Roberts, a second by Ms. Russell. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Superintendent Maine, did you want to say a few words?
Yes, I have the pleasure this evening of making my recommendation to the board for Miss Amy Morrell as the next principal at J.D. Parker Elementary. She is currently the assistant principal at Pinewood and has done a phenomenal job working with our state through our Bureau of School Improvement, and she will make a fine principal at J.D. Parker. So we are very excited to have her on board and look forward to her work ahead. So if you'll please join me in congratulating her.
Did you you want to take this opportunity, at your first ever school board meeting as a principal, to say anything?
Come to the podium, come to the podium.
This is good, this will be good practice.
Wow, put me right on the spot.
Yeah, you're up.
Thank you very much for your recommendation, Superintendent Main. I am looking so forward to the school year. I'm already diving right in and meeting tons of people. So just really looking forward to this opportunity to join the family there at J.D. Parker and hopefully get out into the community very quickly and be able to, put some things together for the families there at J.D. Parker. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Welcome. Yay, congratulations. Okay, item 6.04 is a motion to suspend without pay pending resolution of a district investigation. I know that Superintendent Main spoke to each individual board member. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Roberts.
So moved.
Pick one.
I have a motion by Mr. DiTerlizzi, a second by
Second.
Ms. Roberts. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. All right, thank you all very much. That was pretty easy. Now we're on to our public hearing. And I will call up our CFO, Carter Morrison.
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members, Superintendent Main, members of the community, staff on hand, and those who may be watching us over the internet this afternoon. We are here today to conduct the first of two meetings under the Truth in Millage statute, Florida Statute 200. Madam Chair, I would ask if the superintendent could address item 3.01.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, the purpose of today's meeting is for the board to adopt the tentative millage rates and budget for the 2023-24 fiscal year after receiving public input. Trim or truth and millage advertisements have been placed according to the specifications of law. Trim requires that the first issue we discuss at the public hearing is the proposed millage rates for the fiscal year. By law, the budget is required to be adopted after the adoption of the millage rates and after public input. Madam Chair, I will ask Mr. Morrison to review the 23-24 proposed millage rates, followed by any public input. Then the board will adopt the tentative millage rates contained in the accompanying resolution 2302. I will then ask Mr. Morrison to review the tentative budget, followed by input from the public. Then the board will adopt the tentative budget contained in the accompanying resolution 2023-03. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am now at agenda item 4.01, discussion of the proposed millage rates. In comparison to the millage rates that were adopted by the board in 2022-23, the required local effort was set at 3.24 mils. The proposed millage for 2023-24 for the required local effort is 3.195, or 0.045 less than last year. The local board millage, which consists of the discretionary operating millage of 0.748, the additional voted millage of 0.50, and the capital outlay millage all remain the same over year. So the total millage adopted by the school board in 22-23 was 5.988 mils, as proposed to the 23-24 millage rate of 5.9430 mils, or 0.0450, or 1.39% less than the proposed millage rate, from the adopted millage rate from last year. However, in comparison to our rollback rate, in 2023-24, we roll back those rates to 23-24 levels, and the required local effort is of 3.1950 mils is rolled back to 2.8726. The discretionary operating millage of 0.748 is rolled back to 0.6632. Additional voted millage is 0.4433 rolled back, and capital outlay 1.3299 mils. Therefore, the rollback rate is 5.309 mils as opposed to the proposed rate of 5.94 mils, or 0.6340, or 11.94% higher than the rollback rate. Hence, at your desks, on the podium, at your dais, we have copies of the advertisement that ran last week that include in there, in the budget summary ad, you will see a notice of proposed tax increase, because the current proposed millage rate is higher than the rollback rate. As we do customarily every year, we look at the tax on a residential home in two scenarios. Also, included in your packet is an email that I received from the property appraiser's office that gives us the median single-family home properties in 22-23 based on the July 1 certification, and also the average, which we have utilized for purposes of this presentation. And in 22-23, this is assuming no increase in assessed valuation on a $696,000 home. In 22-23, this homeowner would have paid $4,022.82 in taxes versus 23-24, $3,992, or $30.23, or 0.75 less, assuming that there was no increase in the assessed valuation. However, as reported by our property appraiser and certified to the state, there's an average of 14.68% increase in the assessed valuation or tax roll year over last year. Now, again, this is also capped at the 3% based on the constitutional amendment passed in Florida to save, it's called the Save Our Homes Act. So this taxpayer only is paying based on the first $17,836 increase in the assessment. Therefore, for 22-23, they would have paid $3,410.24, utilizing last year's assessed valuation, and in 23-24, $3,490 or $80.37, or 2.36% higher. Madam Chair, at this time, I request the board sound the halls for any public input on the proposed tentative millage rate, which is agenda item 4.02 on the agenda.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on.
Madam Chair, we are now at agenda item 4.03, and it would be in order for the board to adopt the resolution as presented.
Do you want me to, do we need to read this into the record, or we're good?
No, ma'am, you just
Okay.
need to vote
Making
on
sure.
the
Okay,
item as presented.
do I have a motion?
I move approval of resolution number 2023-02 that is setting the millage rate.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Roberts and a second by Ms. Russell. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we are now, and members of the board, we are now at agenda item 5.01, which looks at the 2023-24 proposed tentative budget. The beginning budget, as adopted by the board in September last year, was $564,048,857. The general operating fund for the current year is $246,581,488. On page 32 of your budget books, on lines 20 and 21, you will see that the increase in the budget is largely driven by the 14.68% in the increase in the tax roll and the revenues coming into the general operating fund. Debt service is set at $13,837,361, which can be found on page 181 of your budget book. In this instance, we are utilizing approximately $2 million of the fund balance that was held in the debt service fund, so we don't have to make any additional transfers from our capital fund, so we can take care of our capital projects. Our capital projects budget is tentatively set at $252,023,409, and that can be found on page 183 of your budget book. The capital projects budget decrease is primarily being driven by the flatlining of our sales tax collection revenue estimate. We flatlined it at $20 million. And also the refund, as the board may recall, of sale of LCIF monies that were utilized for sales tax projects that were reimbursed by the sales tax, which then dropped the fund balance. Food service can also now be found on page 191 of your budget books. And the food service budget is based on that $1 million increase. It is tentatively set at $18,950,240. The primary driver of that on page 191 is an increase in your food cost for next year, which lends itself to a larger budget for next year. Federal projects can be found on page 197 of your budget book and is tentatively set at $31,207,703, or a $9.2 million decrease. That is primarily driven by the spend down of the ESSER II and the ARP funds, as well as the conditional release of 75% of the new money for next year as approved by the DOE. And the enterprise fund, which is your extended day fund, can be found on page 205 of your budget book, is tentatively set at $4,351,858. And that $1.5 million decrease is primarily due to in 22-23, because we transferred $1 million from the general operating fund into the enterprise fund, because that was your fund balance. That revenue is not coming into the fund in the new year, so which lends itself to a decrease in the operations. So, Madam Chair, at this time, it would be appropriate to sound the halls on any public input on the proposed tentative budget for 23-24.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on the budget item, this budget item? Okay, seeing none.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We are now at agenda item 5.03, which is the approval of resolution 23-03 for the adoption of the 23-24 proposed tentative budget.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Pritchett, a second by Mr. Dieterlisi. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank everyone from the superintendent's executive team, staff members, anybody who had input into the creation of the tentative budget. We extend to them our heartfelt thanks. We will be back again here in September for the final budget, which will reflect some changes that we've made to the budget and finalize, for example, roll forwards and fund balances and items of that nature. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you,
Thank you.
Carter. Thank you to you and your team for all your work on this as well. I know there's a lot going on, so thank you so much. Okay, we will adjourn this public meeting, and then we will start a no public meeting on our 23-24 Code of Conduct.
Gotcha.
Are there any questions or, so, I had one thing, wait, I don't think I. Let's see. On page 47. So there was let's see, page 47, where it says, these samples are not inclusive but serve as a guide to individual schools. One of the questions came up, there is a statute referenced there is no reference in that statute to, I think there used to be a reference to the school advisory council, but there is no longer a reference to the school advisory council. So I did kind of want to clarify, because this has really been a confusing for parents. And it says, so I would like it to say, these samples are not inclusive, but serve as a guide for individual schools. Individual schools may submit to the superintendent a request for a stricter dress code. Upon review and approval by the superintendent shall submit the request to the school board for final approval. Requests for a stricter dress code at individual schools must be for the health, safety, or welfare of the students. I did check with Mr. George about whether making these slight changes would push us back, and he said no, that it wouldn't
Can I
be.
see a copy of your thing?
My notes, yeah.
This is, you only have one?
Yeah.
So, thanks. Are you asking to clarify that or take something out?
Well, it was taking out and really giving it to the superintendent to say, principals will need to submit it to him,
Okay,
and they'll have to justify to the superintendent, as opposed to going through a SAC committee, that, and then the final approval obviously would come to us.
okay.
So but the burden is the health, safety, which is outlined in the statute, but it doesn't really, the statute doesn't really mention the student
So,
or the,
so are you looking for the 4 lines that say these samples are not all-inclusive? Those 4 lines to be changed
yes,
to these, which would also eliminate the as stated in statute 1011-78.
yeah, because it's not, there's
Because it's
nothing
not.
stated in there,
So
so,
instead of saying that these samples are not all-inclusive, it would say these samples are not all-inclusive but serve as a guide for individual schools. Individual schools may submit to the superintendent a request for a stricter dress code. Upon review and approval by the superintendent shall submit the request to the school board for final approval. Requests for a stricter dress code at individual schools must be for the health, safety, or welfare of the students. Correct?
that's correct. Any questions or about that, or?
No, I think that's fine.
Yeah, I feel like it should rest with the superintendent to review it before we see it, as opposed to,
Yeah, coming
Yeah.
straight.
yeah. And then he would make the recommendation to us. If it passes his test and he's looking at health, safety, and welfare, he's going to make a recommendation for us to approve it if it comes to the board. If he doesn't, then it doesn't come to the board. So that, you're the first level, and then we would be the final, if something were to come, make it past the superintendent, if you're okay with that. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
And,
Yes.
all right. Any other questions or comments about the code of conduct from the board? Is there anybody here from the public who would like to speak specifically on the code of conduct? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the student code of conduct?
Move for final approval of the 23-24 Code of Student Conduct.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Roberts, a second by Ms. Russell. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Did I get everything? Because I know we skipped around a little bit. Let me just take a quick look.
Another open to the public.
Yeah. Okay, is there now general open to the public for this meeting? Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak at this time? Seeing none, open to the board. Does the board have anything?
Looking forward to all the ribbon cuttings tomorrow.
Yes.
Beginning at 8 a.m. I believe Jensen Beach Elementary is first.
I think.
Or is it
think
Palm City?
Palm City.
Palm
Palm City
City,
Elementary's
No, wait,
first.
wait.
then Indian Town High
Wait.
School.
Yeah. no.
What?
Jensen
It is
Beach. Yes,
Jensen.
Jensen
It is
Beach,
Jensen, you're right.
Indian
Woo,
Town
like-
High School, and
See how-
then Palm City. Yep.
Yes.
Maybe I have them on my calendar wrong. Okay, good. Jensen Beach first,
Indian Town High School,
Indian High School at 10,
and then
and
Palm City Elementary
at
at
1:30.
1:30.
right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So we'll see everybody there. Ms. Roberts, did you have something?
Yeah, so I know that we signed a contract with the Indian Town High School about transportation, and when we did that, we asked for the transportation survey, and haven't seen that back. If somebody could check and find out.
Tom Harden received the transportation survey. I can request a copy if the board would like to see.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
One more thing, will we be meeting in our new building August 15th, or are we coming back here?
No,
No.
September.
Oh, okay.
it's now, what's the
See you in
furniture?
September.
It was the furniture, now it's the technology,
Okay.
but I'm pushing them hard. I'm like gonna be,
I hear we can park there now, we just can't.
September, we will be able to pull off the audio-visual, even if we need to move some of the equipment from here over to there to pull off a meeting with one static camera. We're not gonna delay.
are we
past
saying
September.
September workshop or September regular
Well,
board
we
meeting?
would like to do workshop and regular meeting.
Okay.
So September 6th, is it
It's
5th or
it's
6th? something like
earlier
that.
September.
5th, September 5th,
So our last meeting here is August 15th.
yes.
Yes.
So, I would like to plan, kind of before our regular school board meeting in September. We would like to have, like an open house before the meeting, maybe a couple hours before, maybe from 2 to 4 or something, and invite all the local officials to come and see it, and maybe we'll do a little ribbon cutting, at a time certain, so plan on being able to come a little bit early to the meeting, just a couple hours, maybe have some cake or something. And
Chocolate.
yeah. So I'll be working with the superintendent and Jen to put something together for that.
Sounds
And we'll let
nice.
everybody know
Okay.
and invite your friends and, I mean, it'll be open for the community to come if they would like to and check everything out. It's gonna be a great community space as well as, our great board meeting room, so I'm excited. All right,
Not there?
yes,
I'm still here.
do you have anything?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Thank you. I wanted to update the board. I received an email, and I don't know if you all received it either, from Mr. Jones, from the SPAM team regarding an updated floor plan. And he just he had questions also regarding types of investments that the board may be interested in making in building improvements like painting or work on the floor or anything like that. They did make an ask in the letter to see if we were going to dispose of any furniture, if it was good for their classrooms, would they be able to use it? And I wanted to thank Mr. Main for working very well with the SPAM team and making this thing happen as fast as it's going to happen. But they will have some equipment needs and some improvements that they're wanting to know if we'll be willing to make or if they need to go out for fundraising. But they're willing to start up in September with the equipment and all that they have now. So they're looking to make this a world-class facility, and that was it. So keep an eye out. If you do not have it, just Mr. Main, I'm sure you got it. If you would send it to everybody, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, so,
Also,
yeah, I would
ahead.
just ask Mr. Main to go ahead and come up with the plan, based on that email in conjunction with Mark and his team on how what we're gonna do or be able to do and implement this.
The board agreed to the electrical, so the electrical quote will be coming back very soon, probably tomorrow. The team, they updated their plans, so Brian and the team got together with the electrical contractor with the updated plan. We will be able to make the electrical components operational by the September deadline so that they can move in. The request that I'm going to have back to SPAM is that they had asked if we would like for them to try to receive sponsorship for the painting of the inside of the building and the floors first. So I would like to proceed forward in seeing what they can get via sponsorship for painting of the walls and the floor before we come back and request from the board any additional funding to do anything else to the inside. The furniture is an easy move. We'll move the furniture out. Certainly, if there is equipment or pieces of furniture that we are not going to be using and they can utilize that furniture, we will absolutely leave it there. But right now, the commitment from the board was for the electrical and us moving the furniture. That allows them to move in by September, start their work, and then I will be bringing back to the board any additional requests that would result in funding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Maine?
Did you have anything else?
Thank you, Madam. I do not have anything else right at the moment. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Ms. Russell? Ms. Roberts?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.